Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In this week's Make What You See in the Shops, we're gonna make a beautiful dress that is from Reiss, and it is rather expensive, but it's really a nice one made out of different fabrics. And I saw that one on Josie's channel here on YouTube from Fashion-Stylist, and she really has also always very nice pieces that I really like to recreate. So I saw that dress and thought, well, I have to make that, and I will make it out of this beautiful white satin and of this white chiffon. So we're gonna mix the two fabrics together, and because chiffon is very sheer, of course, I'm gonna line it with this viscose line. Well, it's not lining, it's just a fabric, but I'm gonna use it as line because it's very thin and flowy and very nice to the touch, to the skin. So we're gonna make this dress, and I'll show you what it will be.
So, and this is the dress. It's a really pretty one, although the pattern is pretty simple, but it looks really nice because of the two different fabrics, and I'm not even sure that this is chiffon and satin. I don't even think it is, but I'm gonna make it out of it. So we're gonna make it's when we have the belt loose, it's just straight on, pretty wide, because we're gonna gather the bodice to the shoulder part. So the shoulder part is out of satin, the rest of the bodice is out of chiffon, and we're gonna gather it on the shoulder part in the front and also in the back, so that you get some width in the bodice. I'm gonna line it with some nude colored lining. So we're gonna treat the chiffon and the lining as one. That makes it easier to line it, and that gives a nicer result and not too much of a seam visible, because I don't like that with chiffon. Then you see the cuffs are also of satin. The sleeves are rather wide, but not too wide. They are gathered on the cloth, but not on the shoulder part. And then the bottom of the skirt, of course, is also that satin. The belt is a satin. So as you see, it's a rather plain pattern, but the outcome is really, really nice. And I'm still debating what to do with the neck hole, because it has an open V in the front, but it does not have a seam in the mid front, and that's not a problem, but it makes it a little bit more difficult to make it. So I'm debating if I'm gonna make a seam in the mid front, so that for you it is easier to sew that V neck in the front that closes up with a loop and a button. So this will be the dress, and I'll show you when I draw it out how the patterns will be, how the different parts will be.
So, and I made my drawing, and now it doesn't look that spectacular anymore, but as I said, it is a white, rather plain design, but when you make it out of this fabric, it looks really nice. So what I did is I made a seam in the top part of the bodice in the mid, because then it is easier to make that V here. And because I want all my sewing classes also be possible for beginners, I wanted to make that adjustment. So we're gonna make a seam in the mid front of the bodice, not on the skirt. So we're just gonna sew the skirt on. Then we have here the shoulder part in the front and also in the back. And I'm gonna make them out of doubled satin, because I think then we get a little bit more structure on top of the dress, because all the fabrics are rather thin and light, and especially the chiffon, although it is lined. But to make sure that it has a nice structure here on the top, that where the whole dress hangs on, I'm gonna make this out of double fabric. And then we're gonna gather the bodice part of the chiffon and the lining together onto that shoulder part. Then we have here the seam with just a normal rounded neck in the front and in the back, but we have a slit here in the front that is going as low as you want it to be. Just measure out how low you want your V to be. Same for the back, the shoulder part also out of double chiffon. Then gathering on satin, then gathering on the chiffon with the lining on the bottom of the shoulder part. Then going down, we're gonna sew on the skirt part onto the bodice with the seam. The back we can just make out of one piece. Going down, and then satin on the bottom of the skirt. And I'm not sure if I'm gonna make that part also doubled satin or just one layer. I'm gonna see when I finish this up. If I want it double, then I have more weight on the bottom of the skirt. Sometimes that looks more nice. Sometimes it just has to be one layer, because then it is more flowy. So it's depending on how it looks, whether this will be a single part of fabric or a double part of fabric. Then we have the sleeves. I just connect them normally into the armhole, so no gathering or whatever, but just a little bit more wide so that we can gather it here onto the cuffs. And I make my sleeves just only the chiffon, because they can be see-through, and I think it looks really nice. Of course, we're going to line the bodice and the skirt part in the front and in the back. And my chiffon is white, and I have a nude colored lining, because I think that looks most nicely. When you take a white lining, it will appear very white, this part, and here your arms are going shining through. It looks weird. So try to get a lining that has just about the same color as your skin color, because then you can most nicely result. So we don't have any zipper or whatever. I was debating whether I would want to make pockets, because everyone always wants pockets, but I think it doesn't look nice, because I'm afraid that the pockets will shine through a little bit here through the chiffon, and that doesn't look nice. So I'm not making pockets. If you want to, you can. I have some tutorials on how to make pockets, so I will link them down below in the description box. If you like to do that, then you can just put that in and make some pockets into the skirt part of the dress. So this is what we're going to make. So for the pattern, what you do is you take your basic pattern, and if you don't have your basic pattern yet, I will link down below the tutorial in which I show you how to make your basic pattern to your own sizing, and you can use that over and over again. So you have to just make it once, and we make the adjustments to that basic pattern. So if you have one, keep that and use it again. So what you do is you're going to trace your basic pattern, fold it down on the waistline, because there we're going to attach the skirt part. And with the outline you get this, and then what you do is you're going to mark where the shoulder part will end, and I made mine 10 centimeters below the shoulder seam. Measure in your own body how low you want it to be, because I am very short, so 10 centimeters to me is enough, but maybe for you it would be better to be 12 or 14, or just measure how low you want it to be, and then mark that with a line. For the front and the back you can do the same. You can also do the back a bit lower, but I just do it the same for front and back. Then you're gonna cut that part out, leave this on your paper. So that will be your shoulder part for the front and for the back. Then for the down part of your bodice, you're gonna split that part in two, because we want to extend it. It must be wider than the shoulder part piece, because we want to gather this in. And for me this part is 19 centimeters, so I'm gonna extend it with about 6 centimeters. What you also can do, if you are more wide, make about a quarter to 40% of your width as extra. I don't want it to be too much, because then I get too much gatherings here. I don't like that. And what you normally do is you cut this out too, split it in two, and then separate them with in between the space that you need. But because this just plain on, also here just a straight line, what you also can do is just add your centimeters to the side seam. Then you don't have to cut it in two. Just add my 6 centimeters here to the side. Gonna extend that line going straight down. And what I also do, I'm gonna make the side seam also straight down, because I don't need that to go in at the going down in at the waist. So then you can cut this one out too. So then you have the bottom part of your bodice, the shoulder part of your bodice. So then that is done. Then we go to the sleeve, and take your basic sleeve pattern. Mine is really wrinkled. You should take good care of your basic patterns, but mine are used that much that it doesn't look that nice anymore. So you have your basic pattern. Because we're gonna gather it onto the cuff down there, what you can do is you can widen them up if you like to, and I showed you in my basic pattern video how you can do that. So when you want your sleeve to be more wide at the bottom, what you can do is you can trace your basic pattern again, make 2 slits down the middle, or down, well, divide it in 3, and then what you can do is you can flare it out like this. And you see now with the brown paper underneath, and you get more width here on the bottom of your sleeve if you want more room for that. And you can do that if your basic pattern isn't wide enough to your taste. So you can do that if you like to adjust that. But my basic pattern is to my taste wide enough on the bottom. So I'm just going to use my basic pattern. I'm going to gather it in this on the cuff. The top is okay because we're not going to gathering. So to me it's just my basic pattern for the sleeve. And what you also can do is you can tape the front and the back shoulder parts together, just by putting the shoulder seams together, and then you have just one piece. Then you don't have to sew a shoulder seam, and just you put it on the fold here at the mid back, and then you have just one pattern piece. And then for the skirt, you're gonna measure how long you want your skirts to be. I make mine just below the knee, I think. So you measure on your own body how wide you want it to be from the waist down to where you want the bottom parts to be, because we're going to sew that on later on. So you take that off from the length of your chiffon. And the width of it, for the front, it will be of course the bottom of your bodice times 2, because this is the mid front. So for me it is 29 times 2. And for the back it's the same, but then it is the bodice going all the way down. So for the back part you don't have a skirt attached, you just cut your bodice all the way down to the length that you want your skirt to be. And then you can measure how long you want the bottom part to be. I think I will take mine, I'm a bit debating between 8 or 10 centimeters, but I can see that later because I'm gonna cut that later, because I want to see if I want this doubled or not. So just take it off your length of your skirt just about, and then you can see how wide you want it to be and if you want it doubled or not. So then we have all the patterns, only the cuffs, and as I showed you in the video last week how I do that with the satin blouse, just measure around your wrist. I like it that my hand can go through without opening the buttons, so mine will be 22, and I'll make mine just about I think 7 centimeters in single one, because we're gonna double it up. So that will be for the cuff, and of course you need some overlap for your cuff. So if it's sorry, 22 for you to make add another 2 centimeters for the overlap. So then you have all your pattern pieces ready to go. So I've got all my pieces now. So what I have is I have 2 front bodices, and I cut it out of my chiffon and of my nude colored lining. So 2 pieces of this. Then I cut my skirt parts for the front also out of chiffon and of the lining. Then we have our back pattern, back bodice, and then the skirt just cut on also in chiffon and in lining. Then we have 2 sleeves only in chiffon, because we don't line that one. And then we have 2 cuffs, probably not visible with the white on white, but I showed you what the measurements would be. And then I cut out my, I put the paper underneath, my shoulder parts. And as I said, I taped the back and the front on each other on the shoulder seam, that you have just one pattern, and then you don't have to sew a shoulder seam, and that looks more nicely. It's the same as for men's dress shirts that has that shoulder part without a seam here in the shoulder, and it looks very nice because we make the shoulder part doubled. So this is what we have then. This is the front one with the slit, and this is the back part, and they are just attached, and of course you cut them here on the folds. So we have two of those. So what we're going to do now, and first make sure that you put your chiffon and your lining on top of each other and do a basting stitch all around, or do pins, what I usually do because I'm lazy and I don't like to baste everything all around. So, but make sure they are attached to each other because we're going to treat them as one. So they should not shift from each other, then you have a problem. And what we're going to do is we're going to attach the bodice part to the shoulder part, and they should be attached like this. Can grab it, yeah, like this. That's the matching seam. But what we do, we made this part wider, so we're gonna gather it in. So we're gonna make two basting stitches here on top for both parts. Then we're gonna gather it in, and then we're gonna attach it to the shoulder part by putting the right sides together and make sure that the widths are okay. And make sure that you have enough seam allowance here in the mid part, because we need that to close up that mid part seam and finish it. So give it a little bit more as this one, because this one is just going in the inside seam, and you need a little bit more on this one to make it nicely secured. And what you normally would do when you sew with chiffon, usually you use a French seam, and that means that you don't see the finishing of the seam because you put the seam allowance inside the seam. And I have a tutorial about that, how to do that, but I'm not going to do that now because I'm afraid, because my chiffon is very thin, that you will see, because I'll be lining it too, you will see the French seam through the chiffon, and I don't really like that. So that's why we treat them as one, and that means that the seam will be just 2 layers of this one, 2 layers of this one, and then we're just gonna zigzag it or overlock it, and I think then you won't see the seam allowance to the outside. And when you make a French seam with this thin chiffon, certainly because it's plain, I don't think it will look nice. So we're not going to do French seams, we're just going to do normal seams, and that's why we treat these 2 layers as one. So gathering the top and then sew it in onto the shoulder part. So when you've done that, you should have something like this. And as always, press open the seams that you just made, and here put the seam allowance going up, so that way. Then what you do is you take the other shoulder part and you lay that on top of it, and you're going to pin this whole neck hole part and make sure it is really nicely aligned, otherwise you don't get a flat result. So pin them down all the way around, and also this part going down, and you sew that until your seam here. So you pin that till there. So now we have this, and what you're going to do now is you're going to make cuts here in the seam allowance, just making small V's. You need a lot of them because otherwise you cannot iron this flat when you put them right sides together, because you're going to turn it over, it's going all the way through to that side, and only when you put in snips you can iron it down very nicely. So do that first, and also check if these 2 points, so the white part, I must say the chiffon part, is the same length left and right, because that will be your V later on, or your slit. And if they are not aligned, it looks really strange, because then your points will end here, but your attachment where your chiffon is gonna attach will be higher or lower. So make sure that the distance between your seam here and the point is the same for left and right. So I'm gonna do my snips here and then iron it down, going right sides together. So just fold it over, fold it in. If you do it like this, then you cannot go wrong, and you will get it the wrong sides together, and then you can press it down very nicely. So I made all my snips, and it doesn't have to be nice, it just should be right. And for me it's very difficult, because as you know I have bad vision, so it's very difficult for me to do that the nice way, but it doesn't really matter. Just make sure that you don't cut into the what's the word? The threads, the seam. Well, I don't know the word, I will put it down below. I did it here, but it's not really a problem. If you have a really bad cut, then sew it again over there. But if it's just a small one, you just fold it over the wrong sides together, you press it down, and you don't have a problem there. But just give it enough cut so that you don't get stress on the seam allowance, so you can iron down the seam allowance nicely. And also here the corners, cut them down on an angle that you get a nice straight edge here. And now I saw that I forgot to make a loop for the button here on that side, and now it is easy to put that in. Just seam rip a little bit of this seam and put some, I always have these satin cords that are in all your garments, and that I always cut out immediately. You can save them and use them for this sort of things, and you can make a nice button loop for that with that, so that you can put it here in between. Maybe I'll put it here more on the top. I think that is nicer. So do that now, because now you can easily access it just by seam ripping it down. And then the next step will be making the mid-front seam. So you put your doubled parts together, right sides together, you pin that down, and you sew it till where you want your slits to be. So make sure you measure first how low you want it to be, then pin it till there, make a marking, and sew it down. And then you can finish up these sides here that are left, so that are the pieces of the slit. And I will do that with my overlocker, but you can also do that just with a zigzag stitch, and then fold it in and top stitch the slit parts down. And then you can finish up the facing part of your shoulder part. I already pinned it down a little bit, and I will sew this down by hand, because I like it most. You can do it at the machine by folding everything together, but then you have to put this fabric through small holes, and I don't like to treat this fragile fabric like that, so I'll just pin it down and sew it by hand. Also for the back you can do it otherwise, but I don't really like it with this kind of fabric. If you have a cotton it's not a problem, but with chiffon I like to be very soft and careful with it. So pin that, sew it, and then finish your slit, and then your front part is done for so far. Then you press that mid-front seam nicely open, and then you can top stitch here the part of the slit that is left. I wouldn't top stitch it on the satin, because I don't really like when satin is top stitched, but if you like that you can go all the way to the top and then after that hand sew the facing of the shoulder parts onto the bodice. Then we can attach our skirt part to the bodice of the front, of course. So it's just straight on, align the side seams, and then just straight on sew and finish it. So now we're going over to the back part. So what you do is you gather the top of your back pattern and then put that right sides together on top of the back of the shoulder part. So gather that in like we did in the front and then sew that down. So now you should have something like this. Make sure you have attached the facings of your shoulder parts on all the sides. And mark where the mid of your shoulder part should have been when you had a seam here. And mark the mid of your sleeves. And then what you're going to do is we're going to put them right sides together. Match your shoulder seams, the sleeve and the shoulder part, and then pin the whole sleeve into the armhole to that side and to that side, and then you can sew that all in the armhole for left and right, of course. So now make sure that you iron the seam allowances to the bodice so that you don't see any seam allowance from the outside. That's why we made this all as one part with the lining, so that you don't see the seam allowance which you would see if you had made French seams, although they are encapsulated. But I like this really more. So iron them nicely to the middle, and then we're gonna sew the sleeve seams and then going along in the side seams. So put your sleeves doubled again. So the sleeve seam going on into the side seam and this side too. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put that satin part on the bottom of the skirt. Afterwards you can do it first and then sew the side seams, but I'll just do it all around when I have finished the side seams to hem the bottom. And of course, because we have a cuff on the end of the sleeve, you should have to have a slit somewhere. I must say I usually make my cuffs that are wide enough that I can just slip them over my wrist without opening up the buttons, because I cannot open and close buttons with one hand. So I then don't need really a slit. So I'm not really sure if I'm gonna make a slit in my dress, because I also think this is not the dress where you roll up your sleeve too. It's not suitable for this dress, so I'm not sure if I'm going to do that. But what you can do if you want to make a slit, or if you want to be able to open up your cuffs, is you can leave here the bottom of your sleeve seam open and then hem that part just by a small rolled hem that is finished, and then attach your cuff like that. Officially you should make a sleeve in the back part of your sleeve. That means that you just make your whole sleeve seam and then make a slit just around 1/3 of your back sleeve and hem that, and then you attach your cuff from that point going all around to that point with the overlap. And that's how you officially should do it. I'm certainly not going to do that for my dress. but I'm not really sure if I'm gonna leave this open and leave it like that. That means that your cuff is not really closing up like it should be, because then it will be opening up and closing at the bottom of your sleeve. That will be the inside of your sleeve, and it should be on the back of your arm. So I'm not sure yet. I'm gonna sew this and then see what I will do. So I put a basting stitch on the bottom of my sleeves, and the cuffs I put some interfacing on half of the cuff on the wrong side, and then I folded them together and sewed down the side pieces, cut off the corners and then flip them back right side out, and then you have nicely strengthened cuff. I didn't put a strong interfacing on top of it, just a light one, because this is such a light and airy dress. I didn't want too much structure on my cuffs. And now what you do is you put the bottom of your sleeve to the right side of your cuff, so make sure what is the right side. And what I will do, I decided not to make a slit in my sleeves because I'm not going to use it, so I don't bother doing that. But I will do the overlap of my cuff just around halfway, 1/3 on the back of my sleeve, and that's where I'm gonna start pinning, and that's exactly where I'm gonna end pinning my sleeve. So do that. If you have a slit here, of course start and finish at the end, at the beginning of your cuff and of your slit, and then pin it all around. And you pin it just to the right side, because we're gonna fold in the wrong side of the cuff to finish that up. Now I'm gonna hand sew the facing of the cuff to the inside, and then I'm gonna put again, I'm gonna use pearl beads as my buttons, because I like that very much, and I think the color is very nice with this fabric. So I'm gonna put 2 on the cuffs, 1 here on the collar with the loop, like that. And then I'm gonna put the satin part on the bottom of the skirt, and I decided to do just 1 layer of the satin, because this is so nice and flowy that I'm afraid when I double it up that it will be too heavy. So I'm gonna measure how wide my skirt is, and then I'm gonna sew that on. And as I said, I don't like it when you top stitch satin, so I'm a little bit debating what to do with the hem. So I'm afraid I will be hemming the bottom by hand, and I hate hemming by hand. I hate sewing by hand, but I think it is the nicest to do instead of top stitching the hem, because I really don't like how that looks. So I'm afraid I will be hand sewing for quite some time, but then you have a really nice result, I think. And then the only thing you have to do is to make the belt, and I have these 2 D-rings that I'm going to use. I measured around my waist how wide my belt should be, so I take 1 meter all around, and then the width, that is the inside of my D-rings, and that is 4 centimeters. So of course doubled up is 8 centimeters, so seam allowance it is 10. So you make a long strip of 10 centimeters wide, and the length of your belt that you want it to be according to your waist. And when you've done that, then I think you're done. Yeah, then it's totally finished. So I'm gonna do the last things and do a lot of hand sewing, and then I'll show you the end result. oh my gosh, I knew this would be a nice one, but I really like how this turned out. And thank you, Reiss, for the inspiration, because this is really such a beautiful dress. And you saw it was just a very plain pattern, nothing special, nothing different. But again, the fabrics do it all. And you see now, you can make a very rather plain dress. Oh, I thought I had a, oh no, it's a pleat. I thought it was a stain here. Rather plain dress, but it looks so nice, and I must say it wears very nice. But it's very light and airy. The lining is very nice to the skin, so I would recommend not to take a normal polyester lining as you have normally for blazers or for dress or whatever. I took the viscose one because it felt very soft and it's a natural fabric. And with this other fabric on the outside, it feels very nice, and it's very nice and airy. And I really like how this looks. And I didn't make the cuffs opening up, so I just squeezed my hands through, because with this dress you cannot roll the sleeves up. I think that's not appropriate, so you don't have to open them up. And I always like to just make it wide enough that I can put my hands through, and you don't have to make a slit or whatever. I just sewed a pearl on as a button without even making buttonholes, and then it's also very easy to do. But really, this is really my favorite dress. I really like how it looks. I really like how it feels. I just put plain dark boots underneath it, as the model in the Reiss picture had, just with no heels. But still it looks very nice. It doesn't look dressed up, but still you look so much nicely dressed, and it's really a nice dress to have and to wear on the daily or whatever. Or you dress it up with some nice heels and a nice bag, and well, I'm really living this dress, as you notice now. So I hope you liked this tutorial. If you have any questions, as I always say, leave me a comment down below. I will get back to you and give you some help if you are stuck somewhere in the sewing part, or if you have any other questions, just let me know. Please like my videos, please subscribe if you haven't done already, if you like my videos. I'll do almost every week Make What You See in the Shop show. We're going to recreate something you can buy. This dress was, I think, a couple of £100. I saw just this morning that now it was on sale for £60, so I think that's around $100 or something. I'm not sure what the currency is. So it was a really expensive dress. Now it is on sale, so it's less expensive, but I think this cost me around 10 or 15 euros, so $10–15. So really inexpensive, but with a really nice outcome, and people won't see that you made it yourself, that it was that cheap, because it really looks so nice. So thank you so much for watching this week. I'll see you again next week with a new sewing class, and please subscribe if you haven't done already. Bye, see you next Sunday.